Breaking tonight, a massive development in the mystery of the missing Michigan mother, Lynette Hooker. Her body still not found tonight. For weeks, the sailboat known as the Soulmate sat on a mooring ball in the Bahamas. Well, tonight, it's in U.S. custody. The Coast Guard intercepting the 46-foot vessel, and these exclusive images from the Drop Dead Serious podcast with Ashley Banfield, allegedly showing the boat being towed into Fort Pierce, Florida. Investigators are now scouring the deck for forensic evidence, digital data, anything that could challenge the story told by Lynette's husband, Brian. Now, he claims she fell overboard from a dinghy back on April 4th. But the Coast Guard Investigative Service clearly widening its net now. And joining us now live, News Nation.
Tonight, the mysterious disappearance of Lynette Hooker has taken another disturbing turn. The yacht at the center of the investigation, a vessel federal authorities are now actively examining, reportedly went dark before leaving the Bahamas. Its tracking system was switched off. And tonight, investigators are still trying to determine exactly what happened the night Lynette vanished without a trace. For weeks, this case has raised disturbing questions. A missing woman, a husband's story investigators continue examining, a mysterious 9-hour drift through the darkness of the Sea of Abaco, and now, a federal investigation that appears to be intensifying rather than slowing down. Before we continue, if you follow true crime investigations, breaking developments, and deep dive mystery cases from around the world, make sure you subscribe to Global Pulse Report and turn on notifications so you never miss an update. We follow the evidence, examine the facts, and bring you the latest developments as they unfold. Brian Hooker has not been charged with a crime, and his attorneys maintain he is innocent. But tonight, investigators, boating experts, and Lynette's family are still searching for answers in a case that continues growing more unsettling with every passing day. And tonight, one major question still remains unanswered. What really happened to Lynette Hooker? Before there was a federal investigation, before online communities became obsessed with the mystery, before true crime creators began analyzing every movement aboard Soulmate, there was simply Lynette Hooker, a mother, a grandmother, a woman described by family members as intelligent, adventurous, and deeply devoted to the people she loved. Friends say Lynette spent years building a stable life through hard work and careful planning. According to reports, she worked for decades at AT&T and accumulated retirement savings over many years. Those who knew her say she was practical, careful, organized, not reckless, which is why her disappearance has become so difficult for many people to understand. Because according to the official account, Lynette simply vanished into the water during a nighttime dinghy ride in the Bahamas. No confirmed witnesses, no distress signal, no recovered body, no belongings floating back to shore. Nothing, just silence. And for Lynette's family, that silence has become unbearable. But to understand why this case exploded into national attention, you first have to understand the life Lynette and her husband Brian Hooker were living before everything changed. For years, Brian and Lynette pursued what many people would consider a dream life. They sold much of what they owned and moved aboard a sailboat called Soulmate, a 46-foot Morgan yacht that became both their home and their lifestyle. The name itself now feels haunting. Soulmate, the vessel they reportedly named after what they believed they were to one another. Social media photographs show turquoise waters, marinas glowing at sunset, tropical anchorages, and smiling moments aboard the yacht. To outsiders, their life looked peaceful, free, adventurous, the kind of life many people fantasize about while sitting behind office desks. The couple documented parts of their sailing journey online, sharing moments from the Caribbean and the Bahamas. Viewers watched them travel between islands, repair the boat, navigate rough weather, explore beaches, cook meals aboard Soulmate. And for many followers, the couple appeared happy. But investigators and family members would later begin questioning whether the reality behind that image was more complicated. Because while social media can capture sunsets and calm ocean water, it cannot always reveal what is happening behind closed cabin doors. And tonight, that question hangs over this entire investigation. What was really happening aboard Soulmate before Lynette disappeared? By early 2026, Brian and Lynette had settled temporarily in the Abaco Islands in the Bahamas. For those unfamiliar with the region, the Abacos are famous for boating culture. Crystal clear water, fishing communities, sailing tourism, busy marinas, narrow channels filled with moving vessels. It is a place where sailors often know one another, a place where people on the water pay attention. And according to multiple experienced sailors who later weighed in publicly on the case, unusual situations at sea are often noticed very quickly. That detail becomes critically important later. The couple reportedly anchored Soulmate near Marsh Harbor and Aunt Pat's Bay, areas popular among long-term sailors and visitors alike. Locals familiar with the region later explained that the Sea of Abaco is not endless deep ocean. In many places, the water is relatively shallow, clear, visible, and according to many observers, that reality raises one of the most haunting questions in the entire investigation. If Lynette truly entered the water that night, why has absolutely nothing connected to her ever surfaced? No bag, no clothing, no remains, nothing. And as the investigation deepened, that absence became more disturbing. April 4th, 2026. The last confirmed day Lynette Hooker was seen alive. According to Brian Hooker's account, the day initially appeared normal. The couple reportedly spent time around the islands earlier in the day, including visiting Tahiti Beach.
Did police ever explicitly ask you if you hurt your wife?
Of course.
What did you say to them?
I said I've never harmed Lynette, and I never would harm Lynette, and I want to find Lynette.
This morning, I've ever been apart from her in 25 years.
As you can imagine, things are chaos and hectic, and I welcome any attention, anything that helps me further my goal of finding Lynette.
Photos from the Bahamas show stunning water and calm conditions. Nothing about the setting suggested that within hours, one of the most discussed maritime mysteries of the year would begin unfolding. Later that evening, Brian and Lynette reportedly went to the Abaco Inn, a waterfront restaurant overlooking the harbor. Investigators believe this location may be extremely important, because according to reports, the Abaco Inn is the last publicly known place where Brian and Lynette were seen together. Surveillance footage reportedly exists, but authorities in the Bahamas allegedly instructed the establishment not to release the footage publicly while the investigation remains ongoing. And tonight, many people believe those recordings could eventually answer some of the biggest unanswered questions in the case. What time did they actually leave? Did witnesses notice tension between them? Did they appear normal? Were they arguing? Did staff observe anything unusual? Those answers may already exist inside investigative files. But for now, the footage remains unseen by the public. According to family statements, Lynette also spoke with her mother earlier that day. Nothing reportedly sounded alarming. Nothing suggested she was frightened. Nothing suggested she would vanish forever only hours later.
She watched the weather station religiously, and to her to get on this dinghy and fall off and not be able to swim back to it?
And then came the dinghy ride. This is where the official story truly begins. According to Brian Hooker, he and Lynette left the Abaco in sometime between 7 and 7:30 p.m. To return to Soulmate, they reportedly boarded a small inflatable dinghy, an 8-foot hard-bottom boat used to travel between shore and anchored vessels. Their yacht was reportedly anchored offshore in Aunt Pat's Bay. Brian claims conditions on the water suddenly became dangerous. According to his account, Lynette fell overboard. He says he attempted to save her. He says the dinghy engine failed. He says he lost an oar. And he says he then drifted alone for approximately 9 hours before eventually reaching shore around 4 a.m. That is the core of Brian Hooker's version of events. And tonight, investigators continue examining whether that account fully matches the available evidence. Initially, many people viewed the disappearance as a tragic accident at sea. Storms happen. People fall overboard. Ocean conditions can change rapidly. At first glance, the explanation seemed possible. But almost immediately, troubling questions began emerging. Why was Lynette never found? Why did no belongings surface? Why did some experienced sailors publicly state that parts of the account felt unusual? Why did the timeline appear unclear? And perhaps most importantly, why did this case escalate into what federal authorities later described as a criminal investigation? That shift changed everything, because investigators were no longer treating this solely as a maritime accident. They were now examining the possibility that something far more disturbing may have happened. Following Brian Hooker's report, authorities launched a large-scale search operation. The Royal Bahamas Police Force became heavily involved. The Royal Bahamas Defense Force joined search efforts. The United States Coast Guard also participated. Helicopters searched from the air. Patrol vessels combed the water. Crews examined nearby coastlines and channels. But despite extensive efforts, absolutely nothing connected to Lynette Hooker was recovered. And as hours turned into days and days turned into weeks, the lack of physical evidence became increasingly difficult for investigators and observers to ignore. Locals familiar with the Sea of Abaco reportedly told media outlets that the water often returns debris, personal belongings, floating objects, evidence. But in Lynette's case, the sea remained completely silent. That silence would later become one of the central mysteries surrounding the investigation. Meanwhile, Lynette's family began speaking publicly, and what they said dramatically changed public perception of the case. Family members questioned Brian Hooker's version of events. Some alleged the marriage may have experienced difficulties. Others claimed Lynette may not have been happy. Reports also surfaced alleging past domestic incidents. Tonight, it is critically important to state clearly that Brian Hooker has denied wrongdoing and has not been charged with a crime. But the growing public conflict between Brian and Lynette's family intensified national attention almost immediately, especially after Lynette's daughter, Carly Aylesworth, began speaking openly to media outlets.
I don't feel like she would just fall off a boat. They were in like the healthiest relationship at the end.
Carly repeatedly stated that she believes important questions remain unanswered. And according to those close to the family, they remain determined to keep pressure on investigators until they understand exactly what happened. As media attention intensified, another detail quietly began spreading online: the timeline. Specifically, Brian Hooker's claim that he drifted alone for approximately 9 hours in a disabled dinghy. For many experienced sailors, that timeline immediate. The deeper investigators looked into Brian Hooker's account, the more attention shifted toward one specific detail: the timeline. Because according to Brian, after Lynette disappeared into the dark waters near their anchored yacht, he spent the next several hours drifting helplessly through the Sea of Abaco. Alone. No engine. No rescue. No communication. No successful attempt to return to Soulmate. And for many people first hearing the story, that explanation sounded possible. Tragic. But possible. The ocean can be unpredictable. Panic changes perception. Darkness destroys visibility. People become disoriented at sea. Initially, many observers believed the case may have been nothing more than a devastating maritime accident. But as experienced sailors, investigators, and online analysts began examining the details more closely, questions started emerging almost immediately. And those questions would eventually transform the Lynette Hooker investigation into one of the most discussed maritime mysteries in recent memory. Because according to some experts, the numbers simply did not seem to fit. To understand why the timeline became so controversial, you first have to understand the geography of the Abacos. The Sea of Abaco is not isolated open ocean. It is a highly active boating region filled with sailboats, marinas, fishing vessels, ferries, charter traffic, and local marine movement, especially around Marsh Harbor and nearby anchorages. Sailors familiar with the area later explained publicly that nighttime traffic on the water is not unusual. Even after sunset, boats continue moving between marinas, restaurants, anchorages, and shoreline communities. That detail matters because according to Brian Hooker's account, he allegedly drifted through this region for approximately 9 hours without being rescued or noticed. And for many experienced boaters, that immediately raised concerns. Not accusations, not proof of wrongdoing, but concerns. Because maritime culture operates differently from life on land. People at sea pay attention. Boat lights stand out in darkness. Distress becomes visible. And according to many longtime sailors who later discussed the case online, a drifting dinghy at night would normally attract assistance fairly quickly, especially in an active boating zone. The questions only intensified once boating experts began examining environmental conditions from the night Lynette disappeared. wind direction, current movement, water flow, estimated drift speeds, distance calculations. And according to multiple independent analysts, the estimated movement patterns did not fully align with Brian's reported timeline. That detail would become one of the biggest turning points in the entire case. Because suddenly, this was no longer simply a missing person investigation. It had become a timeline investigation. One of the most widely discussed reconstructions came from experienced sailor and content creator Blaine Stevenson. Stevenson reportedly became deeply interested in understanding whether Brian Hooker's account physically matched the conditions on the water that night. Rather than simply speculating online, he attempted practical drift recreations using similar environmental conditions. The experiment quickly spread across true crime communities and sailing forums. And according to discussions surrounding the reconstruction, the dinghy appeared to drift significantly faster than many expected. That finding became explosive online. Because if the drift conditions were indeed faster than Brian described, then investigators would need to determine why the reported timeline appeared extended. Now tonight, it is extremely important to emphasize something clearly. Independent recreations are not official law enforcement conclusions. They do not independently prove criminal wrongdoing. Conditions at sea can vary dramatically depending on tide, current shifts, wind changes, equipment condition, panic, visibility, and human behavior. But despite those limitations, the recreations intensified public suspicion surrounding the timeline. And once the internet became involved, the scrutiny multiplied rapidly. Online communities began conducting their own analyses. Users compared nautical charts. Others reviewed weather data from April 4th. Some examined wind forecasts and current reports archived from the Bahamas. And throughout those discussions, one central idea continued appearing again and again. Something feels wrong. That emotional reaction became one of the defining features of the Lynette Hooker case. Because even among people who were not experienced sailors, the timeline created unease. How could a man drift alone for 9 hours through a populated boating region without attracting help? Why was no distress signal issued earlier? Why was there no confirmed sighting from another vessel? And perhaps most haunting of all, why did absolutely nothing connected to Lynette ever surface? That absence became increasingly difficult for many observers to ignore. Because according to local boaters and experienced sailors interviewed publicly, the waters surrounding the Abacos frequently return floating debris. Objects drift. Personal items surface. Currents carry evidence toward shorelines and nearby cays. But in Lynette's case, the ocean revealed nothing. No bag. No flotation device. No clothing. No confirmed remains. Nothing. And as days turned into weeks, that silence became more disturbing. Meanwhile, investigators reportedly continued reconstructing Brian Hooker's movements minute by minute. What time did the couple leave the Abaco in? What route did the dinghy allegedly take? Where was Soulmate anchored precisely? How long would drift conditions realistically require? Could environmental conditions explain the timeline? And perhaps most importantly, did electronic evidence match Brian's statements? That last question may ultimately become one of the most important parts of the entire investigation. Because modern maritime investigations rely heavily on digital systems. GPS tracking, navigation logs, phone records, electronic timestamps, AIS broadcasts, location data, digital communication histories. And according to reports, federal authorities later seized electronic devices connected to Soulmate as part of the investigation. That development dramatically raised the stakes, because digital systems often preserve timelines more accurately than human memory, especially during traumatic events where confusion and panic may distort perception. And investigators understand something extremely important. When stories and electronic evidence disagree, the digital evidence usually wins. As the timeline controversy intensified, another detail quietly became one of the most anticipated pieces of evidence in the entire case. The surveillance footage from the Abaco Inn. Authorities reportedly instructed the restaurant not to release the footage publicly while the investigation remains active. That decision only increased public curiosity, because many people believe the recordings may answer several critical questions. What time did Brian and Lynette actually leave? Did witnesses observe tension between them? Did they appear intoxicated? Did they seem calm? Was there an argument? Did anything unusual happen before they departed? Tonight, investigators likely already know those answers. But the public does not. and that secrecy has fueled intense speculation online. Meanwhile, Lynette's family continued speaking publicly about their concerns. Her daughter Carly Aylesworth repeatedly emphasized that she believes important questions remain unanswered. And throughout interviews, the emotional pain inside the family became increasingly visible. Because for them, this investigation is not just a headline. It is personal. A mother disappeared. A grandmother vanished. And weeks later, they still had no explanation. No closure. No body. Just uncertainty. That emotional vacuum became one of the driving forces keeping public attention focused on the case. And then came another disturbing development. Reports began surfacing regarding the condition of the marriage itself. Some family members publicly suggested Lynette may not have been happy aboard Soulmate. Others described possible emotional strain connected to life at sea. Now tonight, it is important to emphasize that relationships are complicated. Living full-time aboard a sailboat creates unique pressures. Isolation, financial stress, confined spaces, constant maintenance, weather challenges, and emotional dependency. Many couples struggle under those conditions. But as public attention intensified, speculation surrounding the marriage became unavoidable. Especially because some observers began focusing on financial questions as well. According to reports, Brian and Lynette had invested much of their lives into the sailing lifestyle. Maintaining a live-aboard yacht is expensive. Fuel, repairs, docking fees, insurance, equipment maintenance, unexpected mechanical problems. And according to discussions surrounding the case, some people questioned whether financial pressure may have existed behind the scenes. Tonight, financial stress alone does not prove criminal wrongdoing, but investigators routinely examine assets, retirement accounts, insurance policies, debt, and financial strain during missing person investigations, especially when timelines remain disputed. And as those questions spread online, the public became increasingly divided. Some believed Brian Hooker was being unfairly judged before charges had ever been filed. Others believed the inconsistencies surrounding the case were too significant to ignore. That division became especially visible across YouTube and social media platforms. Some creators defended the possibility of a tragic accident. Others openly suggested foul play. But throughout all the speculation, one reality remained unchanged. Investigators continued treating the case seriously. And according to reports, federal involvement only expanded. The United States Coast Guard Investigative Service, CAIS, reportedly continued examining electronic evidence connected to Soulmate. That detail matters enormously, because CAIS does not function like ordinary search and rescue operations. It is a criminal investigative agency. Its responsibilities include major maritime crimes, federal investigations, forensic analysis, and complex criminal cases connected to waterways and vessels, which means authorities clearly believed the case required deeper examination. And then, just as public fascination surrounding the timeline reached its peak, another shocking development emerged. Soulmate itself began moving. The yacht at the center of the investigation departed the Bahamas. But according to vessel tracking reports and online observers monitoring maritime data, something happened during that journey that immediately triggered alarm throughout the sailing community. The AIS system connected to Soulmate reportedly went dark. To understand why that detail became so controversial, you first need to understand what AIS actually is. AIS stands for Automatic Identification System. It functions like a digital maritime tracking signal. When active, AIS broadcasts a vessel's location, movement, speed, direction, and identifying information. Other boats can see it. Ports can track it. Authorities can monitor it. Families can follow vessels online in real time. And sailors depend on AIS constantly for safety and awareness. So when reports surfaced that Soulmate's AIS transmission disappeared while connected to an active federal investigation, people noticed immediately. Now tonight, it is important to be very precise here. Turning off AIS is not automatically illegal. Captains sometimes disable systems because of technical failures, privacy concerns, power issues, or signal complications. But critics argued the timing surrounding Soulmate's AIS disappearance felt deeply suspicious. Because this was not just any sailboat. This was the vessel tied to the disappearance of Lynette Hooker. A missing woman, an unresolved timeline, an active federal investigation. And suddenly, the boat's digital visibility disappeared. That detail exploded across social media almost instantly. Who turned the AIS off? Why was it disabled? Was it coincidence? Or was someone attempting to avoid public tracking? But despite the absence of charges, the emotional pressure surrounding the investigation continues growing. Because behind all the theories and headlines is still a missing woman. A mother, a grandmother, a family waiting for answers. And according to public statements from Lynette's daughter Carly Aylesworth, the family remains determined to keep attention focused on the case until they learn the truth. That determination has helped keep the investigation in national headlines. Because unlike many missing person cases that slowly fade from public discussion, the Lynette Hooker mystery continues evolving. New questions continue emerging, new theories continue spreading, and investigators continue pursuing evidence. At the same time, many observers believe authorities may be withholding critical details from the public intentionally. Why? Because investigators often protect key evidence during active criminal investigations, especially when forensic testing remains ongoing, witness interviews continue, or authorities are attempting to verify statements privately. And tonight, many people following this case believe investigators may already know far more than they have publicly revealed. Perhaps inside surveillance footage from the Abaco Inn. Perhaps inside navigation records extracted from Soulmate. Perhaps inside digital timelines reconstructed from electronic systems. Or perhaps inside witness statements investigators have not released publicly. Because somewhere within those unanswered hours, authorities believe the truth still exists. And tonight, investigators continue searching for it. But perhaps the most heartbreaking reality of all is this. No matter how many theories spread online, no matter how many videos are uploaded, no matter how many investigators analyze maps, drift patterns, and timelines, Lynette Hooker is still missing. And somewhere tonight, her family is still waiting. Waiting for answers. Waiting for closure. Waiting to finally understand what really happened in the darkness of the Sea of Abaco. Because despite all the federal attention, despite the seized yacht, despite the forensic examinations, despite the public scrutiny, one terrifying mystery still remains. What really happened to Lynette Hooker? And until investigators uncover that answer, this case is far from over. If you want to stay informed with accurate, responsible reporting on global events, subscribe to Global Pulse Report and turn on notifications. Like this video to support balanced coverage, and share your thoughts in the comments, thoughtfully, respectfully, humanely. Stay informed. Stay aware. Stay vigilant.